Jake Ludington here at HP Discover, and I'm here with Irshad Raihan, and we're going to talk a little bit about AppSystem Hadoop and what's new around Hadoop and HP.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Obviously, we announced the AppSystem a while back, and we have some modifications and additions around it, and we have a ton of stuff going on around big data. We talked about Moonshot at this conference. Just tremendous energy savings and complexity reduction, and just overall savings in in a data center to run your big data workloads. And then we also announced a Haven, which is really this brand new project. It has all the components of everything that's going on at HP around big data, including Hadoop, autonomy, Vertica, a number of security features as well, and just lends itself to developers taking this and sort of extending it using things like connectors. So we've got a lot going on around big data at this conference.
Big data is definitely everywhere, and you guys are doing a really interesting project around, is it hashtag analysis? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah. It's interesting. What we want to look at is social media sentiment analysis, which is a great use case that Hadoop is being used for. And what we're doing is we're analyzing two hashtags, HP Discover and HPQ, which is our stock symbol, and we're tracking sentiment analysis around those two hashtags live during this conference. And so essentially what we have is Hadoop hooked up to Flume connectors that essentially scoop the data into Hadoop, and then we move that data into Vertica for some additional social sentiment analysis. Vertica has specialized software to do that, and then we look at all of that in a really neat visualization that's going on at the booth, and we'll have some of that on our webpage for you to look at as well. So it's really neat. We're able to look at in real time what's going on in terms of what customers are saying, as well as a lot of people who have been to the sessions and learned more about it, what they like to learn more about the solution, and then also what they thought was really cool about it. So I thought it was pretty neat. So
if you're watching the sentiment, that means I should be tweeting about, like, I want somebody to deliver me a free beer and see what happens, right?
It'll work. You never know. 30 minutes or less, or it's free.
All right. So sentiment analysis is interesting as a use case, but it's something that is reasonably simple to do. You've got some healthcare use cases that I think are probably a little more complex.
There are, and thanks for asking. There's actually two that I want to talk about. There's one where we did all the analysis in Hadoop, and this really comes out of the fact that if you look at seniors, right, they tend to use more than one, they're on more than one medication, and a lot of times these pills do interact. And there's only about 1 million reports that go into the FDA every year about drug interactions, but there's really more like 3 trillion drug interactions that are possible. And so essentially what happens is 1 in 25 seniors gets affected by one of these drug interactions. And so we wanted to look at a way to be able to reduce that. And we put all the data into Hadoop and essentially came out with statistically significant interactions out of those 3 million possible interactions, the ones that were most dangerous, that were obviously more than the 1 million that were being reported, and we came up with some really interesting analysis. So really, in a way, Hadoop is saving lives out there. So that's one that was very interesting that we ran with Cloudera.
You've got another use case that also is healthcare related, but it's using Vertica instead.
Exactly, and this is around gene splicing, and really one of the first big data use cases that came out into the sort of the mainstream environment was gene splicing, because if you think about it, there's a lot of data. And if you think about things like, drug discovery, right? There's a lot of different ways you can go about it. With big data technologies, you're able to differentiate signal from noise, and you're able to hone in on the 20% that's really going to get you 80% of the value, right? So one of the interesting use cases there was what they call single nucleotide polymorphisms, SNPs, which is essentially a fancy way of saying different proteins on the DNA. You have the A, T, G, and C, and if you switched one of those out with another protein, you basically get a completely different molecule. And what they were able to do is look at a control genome, and then they were able to look at one of these genomes that was altered and be able to figure out if it has a better chance of solving, or curing diseases like Alzheimer's disease, for instance. And then also just looking forward, 10, 15, 20 years down the lane, we won't be buying pharmaceuticals the way that we buy them today, over the counter or at a pharmacy, essentially because medicines are going to be tailored to your particular genome, because we've got to the point where we understand the human body because of big data technologies, where we're able to essentially custom make a medicine that we know will be more effective for your particular DNA. So that I thought was just mind-blowing, just to see technology, being able to really not just improve the way that we do things, but be able to make things possible that weren't possible before.
And are these things that we're seeing currently deployed in real live environments, or is this still lab testing?
A lot of this is actually out there. The single nucleotide polymorphisms, that's actually a use case that's out there. The drug interaction one is actually out there as well. Some of this stuff, as far as the pharmaceuticals, it's just given how strict FDA is, and there's all sorts of ramifications around this. They're still in test mode, but it won't be too long before you see them being mainstream.
I would think that's a big deal if it's really 1 in 25 that are having a bad reaction. So I look forward to seeing that out in the real world.
Meg Whitman talked about user love, right? If that's really the standard that we set ourselves. If the users love and their lives are getting better because of the technology itself is not an end, but it's really a means to just empowering everybody's life and enriching our lives. I think that's really where we want to be at.
Definitely not technology for technology's sake. As always, it's a pleasure.
Thanks, Jake.